Assalamu alaikum. Hello, can anyone hear me?
Can Dr. Can.
Okay. Please, I would like to inform you that you need to go to Aita Alim and submit your attendance for this session. Is that clear? Assalamu alaikum. Hello, good afternoon to you all. Can you hear me?
Yes, Doctor. Waalaikumsalam.
Yes. Good afternoon, Doctor.
As for the, there are some issues with the attendance. The attendance has been set to record your submission from 3:05 p.m. until 4:05 p.m. Okay, so if you're having any difficulty right now, wait until after 3:05, and then you can submit your attendance after that time. Is that okay?
Okay, Doctor.
All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Doctor.
Okay. I think I'm waiting for the time before we start. So far, we have 95 participants. So I'm expecting roughly 12 more students, right? Okay, 96 now. 11 more. Okay, 97. Okay, while waiting for others to join, have you been able to contact your supervisors?
Yes.
So it means, okay, the yes mean all the groups have contacted their supervisors. Is that so?
No. Only my group. I'm not sure about others.
Okay, your group, have you contacted the supervisor yet? Or there's no response from the supervisor? Sister?
Yes.
Have you contacted the supervisor or not yet?
Yes.
Not yet.
My group, I have.
Okay, please, if you're having any difficulty reaching out to your supervisors or any challenge with the arrangement, please let me know. Okay? And for those who have not contacted their supervisors yet, I will urge you to do so as soon as possible because your time is actually short. This semester is a very short one. Instead of 14 weeks, we have just 12 weeks. And in this 12 week, we have other courses, so I don't want the course to interfere with your studies in other subjects. Okay, so please let's try to do things on time so that we can finish, so that we'll be able to do things without rushing at the end of the day. Is that okay? All right. I think I'm waiting for, so far I have 99 participants. I'm expecting 106 or 98. That's inclusive of myself. So can you try the attendance again? Dear students, can you try the attendance again?
Yes, doctor, but there is no submission button.
Really?
I have submitted my attendance.
Okay, I've submitted, right?
Yes, sure. I did.
Amira, did you mean you have submitted successfully?
Yes, successful.
Okay, so others too can try, please. During the course of the lecture, between now and 4:05, please try and submit your attendance. If you have any difficulty, you need to let me know before that time. So I think it's about time. I can't wait for the rest. I've given them almost 3-4 minutes grace. I'm expecting 105, 106 students, but here I have 97. So dear student, can you see my screen?
Yes, can do that.
Okay.
Yes.
So after our discussion last week, no, was it last week? That was the day before yesterday on Monday. We talked about research process, an overview of what the research process is. So this afternoon, we're going to discuss the regulations that govern research. What are the ethics? What are the things you are supposed to do as a researcher? And what are the things that you are not allowed to do as a researcher in order to preserve the integrity of research findings? So I'll start by defining what research ethics is. Research ethics refers to any set of rules that govern the activities of a set of people. As a pharmacist, we have code of ethics that govern the activities of pharmacists. Those codes will tell you what you are supposed to do as a pharmacist and what you are not allowed to do as a pharmacist. Okay, so similarly, in conducting research, there are some set of rules that govern how you have to conduct research, what you have to do, and what you cannot do as a researcher. Okay, is this clear? Or am I speaking too fast? Are you there with me? Hello? Hello?
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, Doctor.
Okay, are you there with me? Am I talking too fast?
No.
Okay. All right, so the next part, another definition is ethics could also be defined as the standard of conduct that or at least should govern those engaged in research. And those engaged in research here does not just refer to the researcher alone or the investigator. It has to do with how both the researchers as well as the respondents have to participate during the research. So if you are thinking about ethics, ethics does not just imply to what you as a researcher has to do. There are some researches that involve there are some research studies that involve humans. And so in those participants, what are their roles? And what is the limit or the boundary of what they can do and what they cannot do in that research? So this is what research ethics entails. And so as a researcher, you have to comply with the set of rules that govern how research should be conducted. Because if you do not adhere to those recommendations, one of the consequence of that is that you actually risk devaluing scientific research in the eyes of the public, or if possible, if the offense is liable, then you are liable to be prosecuted. So the next thing we're going to talk about is good scientific practice. As a researcher, there are two qualities that you have to maintain in order to maintain the sanctity of your work. One of them is honesty. Honesty with whom? You need to be honest with your co-researchers. That is those who are involved in the investigation with you. You have to be clear to them about what you want to do. So in other words, it means there is no deception of any kind towards your core colleagues. If you have any conflict of interest or anything that you think may interfere with your decisions during the research, you also need to discuss these with your co-investigators. You also need to be honest with your respondents who will participate in your research. See, for example, if you have a questionnaire you want to distribute among students, you have to be sincere, you have to be honest to them as to what you want to, what information you want to collect and how you want to go about the research. Sincerity or honesty, again, has to do with how you conduct the research. So we're talking about honesty in about almost 3 to 4 tracks. The first one is honesty with your co-investigators. The second one is honesty with the respondent. And thirdly, honesty in the process of collecting the data, analyzing the data, as well as interpreting the data. You have to be honest at all these levels or throughout the course of your research in order to avoid bringing in any bias or invalid result into your research. Do you have any question on this?
No, Doctor.
I'm actually not comfortable with this method. I feel I'm just talking on my own. So, well, unfortunately, we have no choice. This is what we have to make do with. Okay. The second thing is transparency, that is being open. As a researcher, it is important to know that you need to protect your own research interests. This is actually a fact, we all understand. But you have to be prepared to share with the scientific community other information or that you found during the information that you've collected during your research. Suppose, for example, now you've conducted a research and you have published your findings. Sometimes some members of the scientific committee may want to have access to your raw data. So as a researcher, you should be ready to make this relevant data available to anyone who makes a reasonable request. Okay? Are you following me?
Yes, Doctor.
Yes.
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, Doctor.
The next thing I want us to talk about is scientific misconduct. So what comes to your mind when you hear the word scientific misconduct or the term scientific misconduct? What does that mean to you? Anyone has an idea? Let me engage you now.
We use it wrongly.
You what?
We use it wrongly. Or
You use. Can you come again, sister? Sister, what did you say? I didn't hear you clearly. Sister Amira? Anyone has an idea? Do you want me to mention names at random or you want to respond? Brothers and sisters, please contribute. Do you want me to mention your names randomly or I give you the room to respond?
Using the respondent info for their own use.
Okay, misconduct, okay, I accept that. Another idea? Yes, Nur Izati.
we use the research in a proper manners.
You use what?
We use it in improper manners
Okay,
or
you
wrongly.
mean the research is conducted in an improper manner. Okay, accepted. That's very good. Any other opinion or idea? Okay, so when we talk about research misconduct, one of the things we talk about is piracy. By piracy, it means you are deliberately taking somebody's ideas without any acknowledgement or permission from the original author of the work. For example, a book has been published, and then you begin to reproduce that book in large quantity, on a large scale, without any permission given to you or even acknowledging the original author of the work. This is piracy, and in medical research, piracy is not allowed. In fact, it is an offense. Okay? The second thing again is plagiarism. Plagiarism means you are copying somebody's data or idea without any permission or acknowledgement. So I'll stop here to ask you, what do you think is the difference between piracy and plagiarism? Is there any difference between the two? Are you there with me?
Yes.
Is there any difference between piracy and plagiarism?
Need to think for a while. Wait.
Can you see any difference between the two? Any difference? All right. The difference is that in piracy, you are dealing with something that is on a large scale, like a book, maybe an e-book or a printed book, and then you begin to use that or reproduce that without any acknowledgement from the author. In plagiarism, it means you are copying just an idea. That is a portion of somebody's work without acknowledgement. So the difference between the two is based on the scale of what? The theft, in other words, the theft of ideas that is involved. In piracy is on a large scale, like a whole book or a whole chapter of a book. That is what we refer to as piracy. For plagiarism, we are dealing with just an idea, a portion of what has been produced by someone. Then you claim that to be your own work without any acknowledgement for the what? The original author of the work. Is this clear?
Clear, Doctor.
Yes, doctor.
So the other thing again is fraud, research fraud. Research fraud happens a lot, especially in the medical, area. Most recently, I think there was some research. There was some research fraud involving COVID-19. I think I'll share that with you shortly. So for fraud, it involves actually deception. Deception in the form of publishing a false result, or even publishing a fictitious result, that is a data that does not exist, or even publishing data that you have not on studies that were not conducted. Deception or fraud can also involve manipulating your result to meet a predetermined conclusion. As in, you have a drug, you want to test the effectiveness of this drug, and perhaps you have a company that is actually sponsoring your research, and that company's interest is at stake. So manipulating the result of the study to meet the goal or the objective of the company is actually a form of research fraud. And this happens a lot, especially in research involving use of medications. So many times, sometimes companies comes in to sponsor research, and then the researchers are forced sometimes to manipulate the result to reach a predetermined conclusion that will support those who are sponsoring their research work. So this is also not allowed in medical system in medical research. Most recently, there was this research involving hydroxychloroquine used for patients with COVID-19. So that was the study was actually published in Lancet. It's one of the leading medical journals. But at the end of the day, it was realized that the conclusions or the result of those studies are actually not valid for use. And so they've misled the scientific community, and the publication has been retracted. Retracted means that it is no longer useful to the scientific community. So if you engage in any form of research fraud, be it today or next year, a time will come when you'll be caught, because for most of the cases of research fraud, they don't get them soon enough. Some people become professors before they are caught. And once they are caught, all of those manuscripts or all of those publications will be investigated. And if they are found to be invalid, then they'll be retracted. Another example is this here, also involving hydroxychloroquine that was used among patients with COVID-19. The third example I have here is the Kyoto Heart Study. I think Kyoto is the name of a place in Japan. They actually conducted this research among patients with uncontrolled hypertension. And it was later realized that the results that were published are actually not consistent with what was conducted during the research. So at the end of the day, it becomes retracted and it's no longer medical education or even medical practice. Okay. Any question at this point?
Doctor, just now you say someone who made a fraud will be caught, like when he already become a professor. But when the paper that he published, aren't those papers are going to be investigated and checked first before published?
No,
so
if he will review. When you submit a manuscript for publication, it will be sent to a reviewer, but the reviewer does not have access to the raw data that you used. And if you manipulate the result, the reviewer cannot know if the result is manipulated, because you are only reporting what you are. The reviewer will only work based on what you have reported. If you reported that, okay, drug A was found to be very effective among diabetic patients, so the reviewer can only work with that. If later on it is realized that the result you actually presented in the manuscript are not consistent with what you found in the field, that is where the fraud comes in. So sometimes some of these people are not detected. I think there are several cases. If you go over the internet, there are several cases that you found. Just type research fraud in medical research. You find a lot. Some have to resign. Some have to be demoted. So some of those things, that's why we're teaching you most of that. Well, that's why we're teaching you these things, to know that whatever you find in your research, report it as it is. There is no need to manipulate your result to meet a specific conclusion that you want to achieve. Is that clear?
Yes.
Sister, I hope this answers your question. So the research will be, the manuscript will be reviewed, but reviewer does not have power over your data. The reviewer only works with what you have presented in the manuscript, and then what the things you need to clarify or to elaborate on, that's where the reviewer comes in to tell you if there is need to improve or if there is no even need to publish that finding. If you have several bias in your study, then the reviewer may decline to publish or ask you to revise the manuscript based on what he or she feels will improve the understanding of the manuscript by the medical community. Are we together?
Yes, doctor.
All right. So now, I haven't talked about ethics, conduct and misconduct, and the impacts or the consequence of misconduct. Let's look at unethical research. Unethical research here does not mean, what unethical means is that the findings are valid, but the process of conducting research in itself has some unethical practice. Things were done in a way that it should not be done. And there are several examples of unethical research in the medical society. One of the most commonly talked about is the monster study. Monster study is called a monster because the study was conducted among 22 orphan children who were stuttering. Stuttering means people who pause when they talk because they have difficulty in pronouncing certain words or certain sounds. So in this study, what they did was to divide the orphans who stutter into two groups. One group was given an intervention to help them improve the fluency of their speech. The other group was given a negative approach. Even if they speak very well, they were told their speech is poor. So what the researcher wanted to investigate is to see if motivating people by telling them, even if they stutter, that their speech is good, if that will improve their speech. It was a good intention, but the research was conducted among orphans in an orphanage. The children did not give a consent to participate in this research. And moreover, the effect of that research led to serious consequences on the participants, because some of the orphans who had very good speech fluency but were told they speak badly had some psychological effect that they lived on with for the rest of their lives. Some of them who had a very good normal speech fluency and were told that their speech are poor or they stutter began to stutter later on. So that's why the study was called a monster, because it was conducted among orphans, being people who do not have parents and do not have people that will cater for them. So, and the study was conducted in the university in the US, but the result of the study was never published because the scientific committee considered this to be unethical. And the university in itself apologized, I think, in the year 2003, after over 70 years that the research was conducted. Another example is the Tuskegee syphilis experiments. This study was actually conducted by the US Public Health Service, among African American farmers in Alabama. And what they intended to investigate, or what they investigated, was the natural cause of syphilis. In other words, if a patient has syphilis and the syphilis is not treated, how does the disease progress? What are the complications involved? So this study was conducted over a 40-year period. And in between the period, the study was started in 1932. In the early 1940s, penicillins was discovered, and penicillins were found to be effective against this against syphilis. But the investigators did not disclose this to the participants. Neither were the participants told that they were infected by a disease. They were only deceived that they were receiving free treatment and free care from the government for the treatment of bad blood. What bad blood means, I also don't understand. So the people were deceived, and then later on, some of these people died of the disease. Others are transmitted to their spouses, and then children were given birth to with congenital syphilis. This is also considered unethical. Why? Because the participant did not give the consent to participate in the study. And secondly, there was a treatment available for this, so there was no need to subject people to this kind of treatments. Okay, another example that is so popular is the Nazi human experimentation. This was actually conducted in the concentration camp by the Nazi Germans in the early 1940s. And what they wanted to do, it involved a range of experiments, several experiments. One of which was vaccines that have not been proven to be effective were tested on people without any consent, mostly prisoners, some of them children. Consent was not provided for them. They wanted to study the effect of hypothermia, and then they used what they call the freezing experiments. People were given this kind of treatment without any consent. They wanted to study the effect of certain poisons on humans. So they inject poisons into people without consent as well. Now, one of the experiments that they also did was the sulfonamide experiment. Sulfonamide is an antimicrobial antibiotic that's used in this era to treat wound infection among soldiers. So to study the effect of this, what they did is that they deliberately caused injuries on people's skin and then infect those wounds with bacteria and then test the effect of sulfonamides on them. If you look at all this, it's actually unethical, because for a healthy person, for you to injure a healthy person, and not just injure, you infect the wound with a bacteria to make it infected. And after it gets infected, then you begin to experiment the medication on such people. I think it's not proper. Ideally, what should be done is to look for patients with an infection caused by these pathogens, and then you test these microorganisms on them. So some of these experiments they did, conducted by the Nazi German soldiers, led to death. Sometimes, if it does not cause death, the patients were killed in order to study the effect post-mortem. And all of these atrocities were later tried at a court that was popularly known as the doctor's trial. All the doctors involved in this war crime were tried, and from that era came the era of what? Medical ethics. That patients who participate in any form of research have to be respected. And that is for where we have the Nuremberg Code of Medical Ethics. And from this time, in the late, I think that should be in the 1960s or so, up to this moment, there has been significant improvement and advancement on ethical issues in medical research. Any question? Do you have any question? Hello?
So far,
Doctor, I have one.
Okay.
I heard about double blinded control study, where
Yes.
they want to minimize the psychological effect, so they don't tell the patient, the effectiveness, and also the one who distribute the medicine also doesn't know. So is that okay? We means that the patient, the participant doesn't know that this is the medicine or the placebo. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, that case is acceptable. The reason is that, for example, if you are testing two drugs or a medication, and the patients know the effect of that medication and what you want to test, some patients will modify their behavior or their outcome to meet the outcome that you want to measure. So that's why sometimes you blind them. You are blinding them of the treatment, but you are not blinding them of the modalities involved in the research. You need to inform them there is a patient information and a consent form. The only thing that is not disclosed to them is which treatment group they belong to, whether randomized control, whether the treatment arm or the placebo group. And the reason why you do this is because you don't want the patient's behavior or attitude to influence this, the outcome that you want to measure. So in medical practice, this is acceptable. Hope this answers your question, sister.
Yes, thank you.
Any other question before I proceed?
Assalamualaikum, Doctor.
Brother, did you say you have a question?
Yes, for this moment, about iTaklim, we still can access the submission button.
How many of you cannot access the submission button?
I mean, we cannot submit the attendance.
But there was a student that said she tried and she succeeded.
But she was an exception for that moment. But we tried several times and we still fail.
Doctor,
Yes?
just now that I said that I successful to submit my attendance, I use an app,
Oh,
another platform to access iTaklim. I can submit the attendance, but when I check, I access iTaklim using the browser. My attendance has no record, no button to submit the attendance. Same with the others.
all right. Don't worry. I think I'll proceed. If it was the end of the course of the lecture, I will create a Google form for you to fill your attendance, and then I will impute the data later on in iTaklim if the system is stable. Although I think they are having some issues with iTaklim. I received an email earlier today. So if you have any issue, just if you are here, don't worry. Inshallah, I'll record your attendance. Is that clear?
Yes, Doctor. Thank you, Doctor.
Okay. I think almost virtually all of you are here, about 104. So can I proceed? Or do you have any question?
Yes, you can proceed, Doctor.
All right. So, like I said earlier, from those atrocities came the era of what? Medical ethics approval, sometimes called IRB, Independent Review Board. And so for here in Malaysia, in most countries, there's usually a national medical research governing center. And then from there, you have state at state level. From state level, you have at institutional level. So here in Malaysia, that is what's called the NMRR, the National Medical Research Registry. This registry actually gives approval for all medical research that needs to be conducted in government public health facilities. Any health facility that is under the jurisdiction of the Ministry of Health, if you want to conduct a research in such facility, you need to get an approval from NMRR. In hospitals that are not under the care of the Ministry of Health, then you can also apply for an NMRR, but it is not mandatory. You can seek approval from other sources. For example, here in UIA, we have the SASMEC, which is our own teaching hospital. So if you want to conduct research in SASMEC, it's okay to get approval from NMRR, and it's okay if you get an approval from the University Ethics Committee. So, but preferably, even if you get an approval from NMRR, you have to seek permission from the University Ethics Committee again to conduct research. So if you're conducting research in our own facility, it is advisable that you use our own independent research ethics committee. For NMRR, you focus strictly for Ministry of Health facilities. For other at state level, at the State Ministry of Health level, there may be some ethical committee that will review proposals of studies that want to be conducted at state level. Is this clear? Hello?
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, Doctor.
Right. So in IIUM, we have our own ethics committee, and it is called IREC. IREC is IIUM Research Ethics Committee. This committee is saddled with the responsibility of reviewing all proposals for research of any kind in IIUM or in any of our facility. But in order to get an approval from IREC, you have to get an approval or a recommendation from the Kulia Ethics Committee. For example, we have the Kulia of Pharmacy Ethics Committee, which have to recommend your own proposal before you can proceed and submit your proposal to IREC. If you're from Kulia of Medicine, they have their own Kulia Ethics Committee. If you're from engineering, they have their own ethics committee. If you're from allied sciences, nursing, each of these Kulia have their own research and ethics committee, which will conduct the preliminary review of the proposals before it is forwarded to IREC. So you cannot, in other words, you cannot submit your proposal to IREC without an approval from the Kulia level or without a recommendation from the Kulia recommending your study to be reviewed by IREC. Is this clear?
Yes, Doctor.
Hello? Or am I talking too fast?
No, just nice.
Okay. So the next thing is, what do they do? What do ethical committee members do when they review proposals? From what we have discussed earlier, I told you that the unethical practices are the things that led to the establishment of what? The medical code of ethics. So one of the things that the ethics committee does is to minimize risks. Risks to who? Minimize risks to the participants or to the respondent involved in the research. Is there any risks involved in the research? Is there any harm that could happen to the respondent who participate in the research? If there is, has it been reduced to the barest minimum level by the researcher? If it has been done, then that's fine. The next thing is that you weigh the risks and benefits to see if the research is worth it. If the benefit involved outweighs the risks, then you have a good cost. You have a clear cost. But if the benefits or the risks involved in the study outweighs the expected benefit of the study, you may not scale through. Such kind of studies will have to be thoroughly investigated, will have to be thoroughly reviewed before they can get an approval, because the risk level involved for the participant is higher than the expected benefits. One of the things that the ethics committee also does is to ensure that the participants do engage or participate in the research without any coercion. In other words, participation is voluntary, and anyone who decides not to participate in the study is not penalized in any way. So the ethics committee will have to ensure that these things have been taken care of by the researcher. Thirdly, is another issue that they do is that the privacy and confidentiality of research subjects. There's some information that you collect from patient or from the respondent. How do you intend to ensure that the confidentiality of this information is not broken? Do you intend to keep the data safe and then there is no third party involved in the what? In the data analysis or data analysis or interpretation stage? If there is any, you need to disclose this. Who are those that will have access to the collected data? Who are those that will analyze? And if there is anything that can breach the confidentiality of the research, it has to be reported so that the ethics committee can evaluate to see if they will allow such practice to go or to take place or not. Another thing that the ethics committee looks at is what? Your subjects. Particularly if you are conducting research involving children, who will give the consent for you to take data or sample from them? Is it their parents or their representatives? Besides children, people who are mentally derailed, people with mental illnesses, who cannot give you a consent, or even if they do, they are not in the right state of mind to give you a consent to conduct research. So the ethics committee is there to protect this vulnerable group so that they are not forced. Another thing again is that, for example, if you're conducting research among students, is there the ethics committee will want to know if there is any form of coercion or force that is exerted on the respondent. Suppose maybe the lecturer, I'm your lecturer, and I ask you to fill a questionnaire. Am I forcing you in any way? If I'm forcing you, the ethics committee has to see this. If I'm not forcing you, how am I doing so? Am I taking your email address that could expose the identity of those who fill and those who do not? Is there any way that the identity of those who fill and those who do not fill will be revealed so that you don't end up punishing those who do not participate in the research? And likewise, you do not favor those who engage or participate in the research. So the ethics committee is actually there to look at all of these issues to ensure that there is sanctity or hygiene in the research process. Is this clear?
Yes, doctor.
Or am I talking too fast?
I think it's okay.
Right. So for each research project that will be reviewed by the ethics committee, they need to make a decision whether to review the full proposal or whether to give you an exemption. Exemption means that there is no need for the for review, or if the research is not involving human subjects. So, but all of these decisions have to be made by the research and ethics committee, not by the researcher. I think I will discuss this one after the other. All right. For full review, the ethics committee will have to appoint 1 or 2 or more committee members to review the protocol of the research and then report back to the committee. After reviewing the proposal, usually they have a template on what to look out for and to see if the research fulfills those criteria. If the research does not fulfill any of those criteria, the researcher may be invited to maybe present. Sometimes they invite you to present if they need to clarify certain things. If there is no need to present, they will ask you to revise your proposal to meet the required standard for conducting research. If the researcher has any disagreement with that, then they have to meet the committee and sort out all of those things amicably. The other thing, exemption. Exemption, sometimes there are some studies that do not involve, that do not need full review. And so the committee, IRB is the independent review board, will then decide to exempt such research from review. But the decision is actually not with the researcher. You cannot decide if your research qualifies for an exemption or not. So it is the duty of the ethics committee. You still need to submit your proposal to the ethics committee. Then, if it meets their own criteria, then they will provide you with the decision letter that you have been approved an exemption, and then your study can proceed. The last part is the research involving human subjects. Here also likewise, you cannot decide on your own, particularly if you have to take specimens or biological specimen not directly from humans, but involving not directly from humans. What am I saying? If you have to take specimens when conducting research on specimen level, okay, when you are conducting research that has to do with coded private information, or biological specimen is considered to be human subject research, but this must be made by the IRB, but not the investigator. Okay, so now I will come to this stage of discussing ethical issues for your patient. What are the things that you should consider when you are dealing with a patient or respondent? Number one, we've said earlier, you need to respect the confidentiality of the information provided to you. Number two, the participation should be voluntary. That is, one, you cannot disclose the information that is provided to you by the respondent. Two, you do not force people to participate in the research. And in doing so, those who do not participate, people can decide to start and then quit later on before the end of the study, or they can decide outrightly not to participate in the research. And there should be no form of penalty for those who do not engage in the research. And likewise, there should be no any form of favoritism that should be given to patients or respondents who participate in the research. Thirdly, you need to take informed consents from your patients. In other words, you need to inform them about what you want to study, how you want it to be done, so that they fully understand what they are about to participate in. Usually, in addition to the in the process of informing your respondent, there's what is called the informed consent. You need to get a consent from them that that they agree to participate in the research. And so, for informed consent, you can either take it either verbally or written. And in both cases, it's actually important to have a witness to confirm that such person has provided consent to participate. Fourthly, do not harm the respondents. In other words, there is no harm done to the respondent, especially those who decide not to participate or decide to quit along the line of the research. Fifthly, there should be no financial inducement. And this is actually controversial because in some cases, especially if patients have to transport themselves to the hospital or to the places where the data will be collected, there may be need to give them pay for their transport or for other expenses that they may incur. So in such cases, it is permissible, but giving them money to participate, to induce them to participate in your research is not acceptable. Lastly, is also ethical consideration for your research, for researchers. So if you are conducting a research as a researcher, it is important for you to declare your conflict of interest, both financial and non-financial. Conflict of interest means anything that will influence your decision in the study, especially the outcome of the study. If, for example, you are conducting a research on the effectiveness of a medication, and that research is sponsored by a company that is actually maybe paying you an honorarium or pay for your conference attendance or give you any financial or non-financial benefit, you actually need to disclose that there is a conflict of interest so that whoever is reading your research work will know that, okay, there is this possibility of bias involved. Although you may do your best not to engage in any form of bias, but you still have to report this. Another thing again is that you have to ensure that as the investigator, that your study is scientifically and methodologically sound. The method and the methodology, the design of the study, the selection of the patient or the participants, the method of assessment that is collecting the data in. The other thing is, again, integrity in data collection. This is very, very important because some researchers sometimes engage in malpractices at this stage. especially if it has to do with questionnaires. Some people give to their friends and then people fill in multiple questionnaires for them just to make up the numbers. Some will fill by themselves. All of these unethical practices are not allowed in research. At the stage of analysis, it is also important that you report the result the way it is without any form of manipulation. If you are reporting also, report based on what you found from your results. Do not manipulate your result and do not manipulate your reports. If there's any adverse event that is associated with the study involving any of your respondents, please report this. Don't keep it, don't hide this, because it may have, some reports may affect the continuity of your research, but it's actually more important to report than to hide this. Publishing your findings, you try to publish with all the authors who have contributed so significantly or substantially to the conduct of the research. So because sometimes we have some unethical practices with people who engage in adding people's name in works that they have not contributed in, or sometimes dropping the names of those who have actually qualified to be co-investigators or co-authors in some work. So all of these considerations should be at the back of your mind when you're actually designing your study, when you want to publish your findings. Do you have any question? Any question?
No, Doctor.
Am I talking alone?
No. I'm here. We are here.
We are here, Doctor.
Okay, any question?
Just one question.
Yes.
Like you said, we cannot give money to the subject or the patient who join the research. But what did the respondent get as they participate in the research?
That's why we're saying participation is voluntary. The only thing you need to tell them is that the outcome of the research will be used to improve, say, maybe practice. In that way, they will also benefit in one way or the other from that. But to give them money to entice them to participate is that sometimes they may not give you a true picture of what you want to evaluate. Perhaps maybe I'm not interested in filling the questionnaire. If you force me to fill the questionnaire, I give you wrong impression. And then that will actually affect the validity of your research. Or you give me money to participate. I just feel tick, 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 tick what you want, and then I go. So that's why it's not usually encouraged to pay people to participate. But in situation whereby the respondent will incur some costs in the process of conducting the research, it is acceptable that you pay them the costs of those maybe say transportation. If beside transportation, if there's anything they need to do that will involve that will involve them using their own money, you can reimburse them on this in this regard. But if there is nothing of such, it is usually not encouraged that you give them money to participate.
Okay, understand. Thank you, Doctor.
Any other question? See, I think I'm running out of time. Just 5 more minutes. So I made mention about something called informed consent. So you need consent from those who want to participate in your research. And this consent is important to either take it either verbally or in written form. So for you, I will encourage, I think in most of your research, you should take written consents. Either people tick something to confirm that they want to participate, or they need to sign on a paper, usually in the presence of a witness. If you need to take verbal consent from your respondent, verbal consent, please, there is need to record for documentation purpose. And before you give your patient signs or confirm that they want to participate, it is usually important that you give them a patient information sheet. And in that patient information sheet, you detail out all the things that you want to achieve in the research, the role of the participants, how the things are going to be, how the outcomes are going to be evaluated, so that the participant or the prospective participant understands what you want to do before they give their consent to participate. And the contents or the things, the elements that should be included in your informed consent include the purpose. Usually you start with the title of the study, the purpose, the activities involved, risks and benefits, as well as how confidentiality will be handled, then primary investigators' contact info, then the signature of the participant and the researcher. And usually, for most cases, especially in medical research, you need a witness who witnessed the signing or the approval of the participant to participate in the research. Okay, I think this is also the same. All right, with this, I think I come to the end of my presentation or lectures today. Do you have any question?
Doctor, back to my question before, like
Yes.
the one who did volunteer in a clinical trial for drug phase in drug production, also the response or the volunteers cannot get any money.
Can you take your question again?
For the volunteers that involved in a clinical trial for drug production or something else, they also didn't get any money for. Is it because the idea of they are volunteering?
Yes, for clinical trials, they are volunteering. The only time that you may need to pay them is if they need to, say, for example, they have to transport themselves to the hospital for assessments. Or if you need to take any specimen that they need to take anything to replenish in their body, you may need to provide them with all of those with money to take care of those things. But participation usually is voluntary. They don't coerce anyone to participate.
Okay, Doctor.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay, any other question?
Doctor,
Yes.
is the term sponsored and funded are the same? Are they both included in the conflict of interest?
Can you come again? The question is not clear to me.
Is the term sponsored and funded are the same?
Okay, means sponsored and funded. Yeah, I think they are the same, because whoever is sponsoring you is the one funding the research.
Oh, so it is included in the conflict of interest too?
Yes, you have to know for conflict of interest. The conflict of interest is, say, for example, a company called GSK is promoting a medication, say medication A, and you are receiving an honorarium from that company. So if you are engaging in that research or you are part of the team conducting that research, then you have to declare to them that I am receiving an honorarium from this same company that is funding this research. The reason is that if they are funding you, there is every possibility that your decision or your contribution in the work may be tailored towards their own benefits and not what is actually happening in the field. So this is why it is important that if you are receiving any form of honorarium or anything that has to do with financial or non-financial benefit from anyone sponsoring the research or anyone involved in the research, you actually have to disclose this in the proposal stage, as well as after the result has been after the data has been analyzed, so that whoever is reading will know that there is a possibility. They can evaluate if there's any possibility that your decision were actually tilted towards that the sponsor. Does this answer your question, sister?
Yes, thank you, doctor.
Any other question? Do you have any question? I'm actually not used to this boring way of lecturing. You feel like you are talking to yourself. But how are you finding the online learning? Hello?
Yes, Doctor.
Yeah, I think you have another lecture now, right?
Yes, Doctor.
Yes, Doctor.
Okay, so I think I will create a Google form for you to fill in the attendance today. Okay?
Okay, Doctor. Thank you.
So I'll post it in the group, and if you have attended, please endeavor to complete the attendance. I think Italim is having we're having some issues with Italim. Once we resolve that, if we're unable to resolve that, I think my next lecture, I'll then prepare the attendance sheet for you to just complete.
Right. Okay.
Is that
Okay,
okay?
Doctor.
All right, so I think with this, I have come to the end of my session today. If you have any question, you can contact me, inshallah. All right. So I think I have another class with you tomorrow. Is that so?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, inshallah, I'll see you tomorrow, and then we'll discuss about your groups. If you have not contacted, if any group is here that has not contacted their supervisor, please try to do so. So that by tomorrow, I want to know how far you have gone about your topics and then the plans to start writing your proposals.
Okay, Doctor.
All right, so I think I have to let you go now because you have another class. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Doctor.
Okay,
Thank you, Doctor.
you're welcome. Sorry.